Good morning, everyone, and happy Wednesday. So glad to be back with everybody again. Excited to continue our conversation about roles on the team. We started this conversation about 3 weeks ago, actually 2 weeks ago, and this is our chance to kind of continue the conversation in a way that brings some of this stuff home, makes it more tangible in terms of the challenges that you guys are telling us you're having around these things. One thing I want to point out to everybody is that there's an inherent tension in business that we all face between structure, processes, that kind of stuff, and the people side of the business. So many agents, when we say, what do you need in your business when they first come to us, so many people say the same thing: structure and processes. Well, the reality is you have a lot of that structure actually, built into Business Tracker is the ability to create, checklists and assign tasks and have those tasks come up automatically on people's calendars. That stuff is really good. And, from a business point of view, you do need some of that structure and process in there because that provides predictability. That provides certainty. It provides a structure that is understandable for everyone to follow. Obviously, the negative of any kind of a structure or process like that is that by definition, it's defined, right? It has limits. It doesn't necessarily account for a lot of variety, right? If you have a checklist, you put those 8 things in the checklist, and those are the 8 things in the checklist. It's really important to have that in a business, but it also has limitations. What often happens that we see is that the people get taken out of this structure and process that they have, which is tools like Business Tracker, time blocking, those kinds of things. They get taken out of those things because of the reality of business, which is that humans are operating it. And humans are never 100% predictable. They're never black and white. There's a million shades of gray when you're working with humanity, not just people on your team, but obviously with your clients. When you're independent, you don't have that team atmosphere maybe. And so you're just dealing with the variability and the natural, differences and interests and preferences and variety of people that you work for. But when you're working with a team, you not only have all the variety of all the clients you're working with and a changing marketplace, perhaps, but you have all the individuals who are within the business as well that you have to manage. And so this is why so many team leaders come to us and they say, I started a team because I thought I'd be able to make all this much more money and have everybody do all these wonderful things. And I just sit back and watch the money roll in and, count all the dollars on my desk all day long. But actually, I have a lot of headaches and other challenges that I have to deal with along the way. So what we're trying to do here is make sure that you understand the inherent tension in the value of structures and processes, but their limitations as well. And of course, the fact that you're dealing with humans, but that's where the money comes from, right? The money comes from one human being touching another human being in a specific way so that that person says, yes, I want to work with you. And all the processes that go through that deliver the value to the client is done by a human. You can't do that with a machine in the same way, right? Certain things machines can do. There's certain things machines perhaps will never be able to do. So when we're talking about roles, we're talking about managing the side of the business that is by definition going to always be shades of gray. So we're going to do something a little bit different today from the last couple of sessions. The last couple of sessions, I've kind of laid out a couple of pieces of things on the slides that I shared with you. This time we want to make it a little bit more tangible. We want to focus on the actual issues that you're facing and think about how these things we've been talking about apply there. So last time I asked everyone to put down a challenge that they're having around roles. And what we're going to do today is I've picked 4 of those from last week that I think are relevant to a lot of people. And we want to bring those people on one by one just to briefly explain their situation. And you can see what kind of relevance it has to you. If it hasn't happened to you yet, it probably will before long. And so these are all concerns for us to prepare ourselves for, because we're likely to face them. So Chrissy, can you tell me, Steffi Friedman was one last week, was talking about kind of initiating the conversation around roles. If Stephanie's on the call this morning, can you please put her on spotlight? Steffi here this morning?
I don't see her.
See if I see her. No, don't see her this morning. All right. All right, then I'm not going to pull her up for this. I'll just say what she said, and then we'll talk a little bit about it. So as I kind of take us through these situations and add some perspective of my own on it, feel free to throw something into the chat if you have a question or something like that. So what Steffi wrote last time in the chat was, the challenge for me is having the conversation My team setup is a bit nebulous and it feels a bit awkward for me to initiate. This is a common thing that we hear from a lot of folks. That is, we have an intact team, we have intact relationships, we have a way of doing business. And now you're telling me we need to kind of deal with this stuff, maybe in a new way, in a different way. And I feel a little bit uncomfortable to bring up the topic with everybody. Like, I'm not sure how to get started. So how many people here can relate to that? If you can relate to that challenge around initiating a conversation like this, put a yes in the chat, please. Okay, got it. Thank you. So the question here is, what is it that makes starting this conversation a challenge for you? Is it that you don't know what the words are that you should say? Or more likely, in most cases, it's you're not sure how people are going to react. You're not sure if they're going to understand what you're saying. Please put in the chat box what you think is the barrier for you. What is it that makes you hesitate to initiate a new conversation like this around roles or some other kind of human aspect of the business? It's really important for you to understand what it is that's holding you back. If you consider initiating a conversation like this, and somehow you're hesitating to do it, even though you really know you ought to, what is it that's getting in your way there? Okay, got it. So a lot of good points in here, right? Each of these conversations, each of these answers is a little bit different. Let me just take them in turn. So first, James says he's concerned on how concerned about the reaction or how it will be received. Yeah, it's a natural concern for us to be worried about how someone will respond to us. This isn't just in our business life, it's in our personal lives as well. And so if we're concerned about how they're going to respond, what that tells me, and I don't mean to be harsh here to anybody, but what that tells me is we have a flaw in our relationship with that person, right? If we can't approach a difficult topic in the relationship with that person, then there's a certain weakness in the relationship. That is a perceived inability or challenge around talking about something that's a little challenging, even if it's important. And so what's the workaround there? Well, there's no easy workaround. What it really is about is developing more solid relationships over time where you're able to talk about other things that are not necessarily related to the simple, tasks of the day and the simple challenges of the deal of the day. But it's about developing a relationship over time where it's more than simply a business transaction. And when you're in business with clients, generally that's a business transaction. But if you're in business with other people on your team, it should go beyond that. You should be able to have difficult conversations about things that are important to the success of the business, even if they're a little difficult to have. So think about things that are difficult for you to talk about with people on your team. Maybe it's the splits that you have. Maybe it's their challenges around accountability. Maybe it's you're wondering if they're kind of like slacking off or they don't care about the business as much as they used to or something like that. Sooner or later, you're going to have to confront these things or simply settle for the fact that they're there and you don't want to do anything about it. But the way to be able to get past that is to develop over time a relationship where you're exploring your relationship as human beings, not simply as a plug and play piece to a business, right? We tend to see people as a skill set. She's a sales guy. He's an assistant. Oh, that person's a TC. And that's all we see them as. That's all we ever think of them as. We never go out to dinner. We never take them out to lunch. We never explore anything in their lives. But I'd like to ask you, how aware are you of answers to questions like this with your own teammates? What's their favorite cuisine? How old are their kids? If they could go on a vacation anywhere in the world, where would they go? Questions like that tell us that we know something more about the person than simply his or her skill set. What it says is we can see them as human beings, not just as a skill set that we plug into our business. And we've talked many times about not treating your business as simply a transaction with clients, right? Well, even more so with people on your team. It's important for you to put into practice a regular way of communicating and connecting with everyone on your team that goes beyond simply the X's and O's. Simply beyond how do we solve this problem? How do we solve that problem? So from a roles point of view and from a relationship point of view, you need to put time in your calendar from time to time, once a month, once every 2 months, whatever, to actually get together and not talk about business. Talk about anything other than business for 5 minutes, for 30 minutes, for an hour. If you can do that, then you start to explore, what does a person fear? What does a person get excited about? What does a person really care about in his or her life? Once you start knowing those things and explore those things, and not for nothing, sharing those things from yourself, then you've opened up a whole new way of relating with the person, and it becomes easier to have those kinds of conversations going forward. So that's an important piece to keep in mind when you're thinking about how a person will receive what you're offering. Because the reality is, if you have all that right, then they're going to meet you where you are in that conversation, in that moment. You're going to say, we need to talk about something here that's important to the business. And they will say, yeah, let's talk about it. Let's figure it out. Let's collaborate, right? It doesn't have to become something defensive, right? It's defensive only because someone feels like they need to protect themselves. But why would they need to protect themselves if they already know that you support them, care for them as a human being, and you want to see them succeed in their life as much as you want to see the business succeed? Next, how to approach the conversation, Joanne says. So approaching the conversation often misses one important piece, and that is providing the proper context for why the conversation is necessary. Very often when we talk with people about how they handle these situations on their teams, they dive right into the conversation. They say, hey, Susan, I want you to work harder. You're not doing enough. You're not converting enough leads. Well, there is Susan receiving this feedback that's negative feedback, and maybe she doesn't know where it's coming from. Maybe she doesn't know why the conversation started now as opposed to another time, right? In her mind, there's a lot of different things that could be swirling around. It's important to give somebody a heads up, to recognize what we call signposting, giving people a heads up about what's going to come so that when it comes, they know it's coming. So it could start with something like, folks, I've been doing a lot of coaching at Chirag Shah Coaching, and one of the things that's really become clear to me more than before is how important it is for us to talk about things like roles on the team or rules of engagement on the team. And these roles on the team, I'm thinking that it's going to be useful to all of us for me to be in an ongoing conversation with each of you from time to time about how things are working for you, how I can support you better, and how we can make sure that everything is truly a win-win for you, for the clients, and for the business. Who'd be willing to be in a conversation like that with me? If everybody raises their hand, great. If people don't raise their hand to that last question, you got to ask yourself whether they're really right for your team in the long run or not. Because this is part of the business, right? In the end, it's about business. It's about being successful. But business is more than just dollars, right? I mean, so many of you tell us that. It's more than just dollars. And if you do anything for your clients, which so many of you say you do, why wouldn't you do anything for your team members? So signposting is an important piece of approaching the conversation. And you can mention that a couple of times before you schedule the conversations. You could say something like, so I've decided that over the next 6 months, I'm going to be meeting with you, each of you, around once a month or so, nothing like specific or anything, but from time to time where we can just kind of chat, talk about how things are going on the team and how we can make things better, that kind of thing. So I'm going to start doing this next month. So, look for some invites from me in your calendar over the next couple of weeks, and we'll set up the first round. Something like that is one thing that you can do that's easy to do, doesn't cost any money. It can go a long way to having the person understand what's coming up because they know what's going to happen and, more importantly, why it's happening. You're setting the context, and by signposting, they know it's coming. Next comment here. I always wait too long and then I'm mad and afraid to say too much. Anne, can you, Chrissy, could you please spotlight Anne for just a minute? I want to ask her a question about this. Anne, thank you for your comment. Thanks for coming on. So, so let me just ask you, when you feel like you wait too long, what you're saying to me is you become emotionally charged around the issue. Is that correct?
Oh, yes.
And so is it your habit sometimes to react at that particular moment just because you're fed up and you just can't take anymore?
Yeah, because I'll take it for a really long time. I'll, like I said, wait too long. I should have
Got it.
said something. Okay.
Yep, got it. Okay, got it. So I think we can all relate. Can you guys hear noise in the background? I've got a little thing going on in the background. I'm going to shut it off. I'll be right back. Daniel, can you turn that off, please? Thanks. I'm presenting. Okay, sorry about that, folks. Had a little machine going there. So, we've all had the experience where we have something's building up and it's like a volcano. It's building up and it builds up and it builds up and then it blows up, right? And so we do need to ask ourselves, when is the right time to address something? And the mistake that most people make here is not bringing it up because I'm not sure how the person's going to respond, which is what we're talking about here, certainly. And the second is like just hoping it'll get better. Like, like this person did it for the third time and it's really a pain in the neck, but somehow I'm hoping that this person just won't do it again. But, 2 weeks later, the person does it again. And so, emotional intelligence is the area in which we think about how are we experiencing what happens to us? How can we have an awareness of the emotions that we're having, especially around anger and fear, which we talked a little bit about a few weeks ago? And how can we make sure that that the gradient, the level of emotion there is not going to put us into a confrontational frame of mind? And so my advice to everybody in this situation is nip it in the bud. I mean, it's not complicated. It's not rocket science. It's when you first recognize that something is a challenge here that you need to address it. And normally what Ann's talking about here, and for most of us is, this isn't the first time. It's like the 900th time that we've had to deal with this issue before. And that's part of the reason why it's so frustrating, right? For most of you, probably the first time a mistake happens, maybe it's not such a big deal. But if the same mistake happens over and over and over and over again, naturally we get very frustrated by it. And so if we wait too long, we're going to have a negative experience. They're going to have a negative experience, nothing wrong with it. So as from a leadership point of view, it's important for you to recognize what you're experiencing early on in the experience. I'm a little perturbed by this. I'm a little upset by this. That's the moment you need to talk about it. You need to address it. Because if you let it go, chances are it's going to happen again. And the further you allow somebody to do something that's not right for your business, in a sense, you're incentivizing them to continue to do that because there's no cost to them. They don't maybe even understand that it's not the right behavior or the right action, or it's not done in the right way, or they're not really sure that there's any penalty for them to not continue to do that, right? It's kind of like training a dog. All right, next comment. Jenna said, not really sure if they ask us what the role should be if we could communicate it properly. Okay, Jenna, could you come on for just a minute, please?
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Jenna. So, what is it around being able to communicate it properly that has you kind of doubting yourself here?
Continuously failing to communicate it properly.
Got it. Okay. So you have evidence that you thought you communicated something, but it wasn't because their behavior shows that it wasn't. Is that what you're saying?
Well, or it's not resolving, or we're trying to be, maybe we forget steps, right? Because sometimes we just think you should know it, but we've realized that is nobody knows it. So you have to really, every little thing has to be explained.
Yep. Got it. Thank you. So yes, it's a real challenge. This stuff is generally not corrected in one single conversation. It's like over time. Chirag was talking last time about an infinite game. For those of you who were on his previous call this week, he talked about the Infinite Game, book by Simon Sinek. And what he's saying is that there are finite games and infinite games. Finite games have a beginning, they have an end, they have winners, they have losers. An infinite game is a game that goes on forever. And nobody ever wins, nobody ever loses. It continues month after month, year after year. And for most of us, that's the business we're in, right? We're in an infinite business. Unless you decide to sell, and unless you decide to quit next year and sell the business or get out or whatever, you're in an infinite game. And so the answers here are infinite answers in a sense. That is, it's about having continuously good conversations over time. Think of it like being healthy. You can't go to the health club once and get healthy. You need to keep going back to that health club again and again and again and doing the right kinds of exercises, the right frequency, and you will become healthy that way. And this is the same thing here. So if Jenna struggles sometimes, then yeah, go ahead, Jenna.
I mean, the other thing, when you're you know that the way that you're doing things could be better. So you want to give the other person an opportunity or the benefit of the doubt that they could make it better.
Yep.
Then you have to adjust. You also have to adjust, which is also very difficult.
Yes. Well, this is I often call this a marriage. Everyone you hire, in a sense, you're marrying that person. You're going to be in that relationship with that person intimately for a long period of time. And you have to negotiate little things, right? You have to pick your battles, and you have to figure out how to be like diplomatic but also kind of clear and firm at times. This is tough stuff to do in your business and anywhere in your life. And so when you're marrying these people, that is, you're saying, I'm going to be in a long-term relationship with you so that we can both experience the success that this business could provide. What you're saying is, I'm willing to, or at least I recognize the need to, have good conversations over time and build a stronger relationship over time. If your relationships aren't becoming stronger over time, not only are you missing out on opportunity, you're missing out on what it means to be a leader, right? People should feel better about their relationship with you over time, not worse. People should feel clearer over time about their roles and not less so. People should feel more committed and willing to support the business over time, not less so. So, we've been trying to address the ambiguity in roles over the last couple of weeks by talking about identifying all the tasks that each individual person has on your team in black and white on a piece of paper, right? And if you do that for each person, and it doesn't have to be fancy, you don't need any software or anything, you just make a list of what it is each person does. And if you have that list complete, then you should be able to put all the pages on your table in front of you on your desk, and everything in your business should be there somewhere on those sheets. I suggested that you do this in collaboration with the people on your team, because for two reasons. One, because yes, they will think of things that you've missed. Absolutely. And secondly, they're getting a chance to be able to be buying into the system because they have some input into what it is, right? They have a stake in what their role ultimately turns out to be. And if you simply hand it to them and say, do this or get out, they don't have much incentive to do that unless it really fits them perfectly. And normally that's not necessarily the case. It's much better, on the other hand, to say, I've got some things here that I've put down. I want to make sure we're speccing out your role accurately. What have I missed here? Let's have a conversation about that. And you can do that with each person on your team, and you come up with something. And then the second step we talked about is thinking about your process from step one all the way through. And we had that example last week about preparing a house for market, right? We took those things out of the workbook. All that stuff's in the platform. So if you haven't had a chance to look at it yet, take a moment when you do. All that stuff is right there. And we've had quite a number of teams now do that same thing. They've put the process on the left-hand column there, and then they added who's going to be doing what. And in many cases, they spec'd out each person on the team so that they see who's doing what for each particular step. And when you do that, it becomes clear to everybody what's expected of everybody every step of the way. And some teams are finding incredibly valuable nuggets of awareness of stuff that they just weren't clear about. More importantly, in doing this together, they're coming together as a team. They're all collaborating and contributing to perfect clarity, which everybody wants and everyone benefits from, right? Nobody wants ambiguity. People want clarity generally, except for the people who want to cheat around the corners and get away with something. They don't want the clarity, but everybody else wants clarity. And so, yes, it's really a challenge if we're not able to communicate it clearly, but really that's on us, right? For all of us as leaders, it's our role, part of our role, to make sure that things are clear in our minds so they can be clear in other people's minds. Okay. I want to bring up one other quick scenario that came up in the conversations last week, just because it's a different one. I wanted you guys to hear it. It was... Yeah, this other one. Keith said, my biggest challenge is helping the team deal with business and life simultaneously. We're a family which blurs roles. Is Keith on this morning, Chrissy?
Yes.
Morning. Morning. Thanks for sharing this last week. So we were talking about the challenge around balancing this family feeling that you have with some of these tougher conversations that you have to have sometimes. Is that correct?
Very much so. And for the most part, the people on the team, I would use the word that they confide in me in things that happen in their life.
Yes.
That affect their work.
Yes, got it.
It's a lot of, I don't know, it's a lot of weight.
Yep, got it. Thank you. So there's a couple of things that are part of this. One is like, what do I do with the stuff that they bring to me that's not necessarily business oriented, right? It's just something going on in their life. They have a sick child or a parent who needs care, or they're not sure about their relationship with their significant other, or whatever it is they might share, right? What are you supposed to do with that? Well, from a business point of view, you can see how that might be affecting the business. From a human point of view, first thing you need to do is just listen, just be there. Right? They're coming to you because they need something from you. When we get to listening and communicating and creating extraordinary relationships later in this process, we're going to talk about the importance of meeting someone where they are. And one of the elements there is recognizing that they've initiated this conversation with you. And chances are, I'm assuming they come to you with the story, that they're coming to you because they need something. And in many cases, they come to you because they need to be heard. They need someone that they can vent to. They need someone that they can maybe get some advice from, or someone they just need to just like share it because they don't know what to do with it themselves. Of course, the best thing you can certainly do in that case is simply meet them where they are and be with them. You don't have to necessarily solve their issue. Chances are you can't. You don't have to give them advice unless they're asking for it. Simply to be there and allow them to share what it is they have to share, because it's so overwhelming for them emotionally that they can't handle it themselves. That's why they've come to you. That's one piece. But from the business point of view, and this is the other part that's challenging for people, is how do I accommodate the needs of people if there's going to be a cost to the business, right? Like if somebody says to me, I'd like to have Thursdays off every week so I can go take care of my aged mother or something like that. What do you do with that? And obviously there's no single answer to that question, but you must understand a couple of things. First of all, it's a business. It's not a charity. It's not a social services agency. And so you need to make a distinction in your mind between what's reasonable and what's not reasonable. And someday you might have to make a decision about what's, not reasonable for the business. I'm not talking about caring for somebody, who's an aged mother or something, but just somebody who wants to take time off, or somebody who only wants to work 25 hours a week, or whatever it is. If that works for you as the leader, you say, yes, that's fine. You have to go with it. But if you decide that it doesn't work for you as a leader, if you don't want that person on those terms, then you have to remember yourself that it's a business. What I see is so many people hesitating to have this conversation because they don't want to confront the person over an issue like this. And you'll hear Chirag say it from time to time. It's not a charity, it's a business. And so I absolutely encourage all of you to develop a relationship with all of your teammates that everyone feels like, yes, this is a family here. And more importantly, this is a family that I want to be a part of. At the same time, that doesn't allow them to abuse what the nature of that relationship is. In other words, what I want to say to you is it challenging for you to have a person on your team who doesn't play their role because they're close to you? Or are we not talking about roles? We're really talking about accountability. Because 99% of the time, that's what we're talking about is accountability. We're talking about somebody not holding their weight in the way that they're expected to, because of something. Doesn't matter what the reason is. It could be something outside of the business or whatever. It doesn't matter. But the question is, because I care for this person, what should I do? Right? Should I confront this person? Should I be nice? Should I let him or her get away with it? And there's 1,000,001 considerations. If you allow one person to get away with it, other people see that, then they start thinking you're playing favorites. And, these things obviously can escalate, and there's a lot there. But recognizing first that, yes, you want people on your team who want to be there and want to be part of a family, but also remember that it's a business. Because ultimately it does come down to accountability. And so next time you find yourself challenged over someone's, let's call special interest or special preference or whatever it is, look for ways to understand what's behind that. Look for ways to collaborate on what would end up being a win-win for you, for the business, for the clients, for the individual, all that stuff, because often it's there. You just have to be a little creative. But third, you have to recognize that ultimately, if it's something that doesn't work for the business, you have to find another way. Reassign the role, reassign that role that person has to some different role that maybe has different hours or a different, level of responsibility or something like that. Or maybe you let the person go if necessary. But ultimately, it is a business. And you're going to continue to have this tension all the time because inherently you want the family atmosphere. But at the same time, the old poem by Robert Frost, good walls make good neighbors. There's a famous poem, Robert Frost, America's poet laureate, wrote 100 years ago called Mending Walls. And basically, he grew up in New England, and he wrote this poem about once a year, he and his neighbor get together and they walk along the wall that divides their property. And they put the rocks back on the wall that fell down during the winter or the summer. And the point of the whole poem is we're respecting each other's boundary, and we're recommitting ourselves to knowing where that boundary is and to respecting it with each other. And so there's a piece of that I think is relevant to business as well. And so you're going to continue to have challenges with this, but you need to make that distinction clear in your own mind so that you can make it clear in someone else's mind. Okay, everybody, we're out of time. I hope that these conversations can be useful for you as thought provokers. You should know that there is never an easy, simple answer to all this stuff that involves humanity. If there were simple answers, we would have known what they were 5,000 years ago, and every team in the world and every business would be working perfectly. There'd never be any challenges. This is why it's important for us to continue to discuss it, to continue to think about the nuance about it, and to continue to think about what other factors can I include in my thinking next time I face something like this. So thank you, everybody, for your examples this morning. Please feel free to send me any other examples that are coming up for you with your team right now. Send it to david@chiragshahcoaching.com, and we'll try to work it into a future conversation. Next week, we'll maybe talk about one or two more of these, and I also want to share a couple of thoughts about how you can make sure that you are ensuring clarity of roles over time. And then after that, we're going to move to another topic. So thanks, everybody. Have a great week today. Have a great week. Have a great day. I look forward to seeing you next Wednesday, and we'll continue the dialogue then.